about we talk about female gladiators a little bit, bring a little bit of history of Rome. So from Sky, history. So this is the former history channel, guys. Gladiatrix, female gladiators in ancient Rome. Female gladiators were a rarity in ancient Rome, so far so good. But the role they played was fascinating. Yeah, fascinating is your own perspective, I agree. Read on to find out more. Let's find out. So the image is a marble relief from around the 1st to 2nd century showing two female gladiators, Amazon and Achillea, in combat, and that's right. Okay, so when discussing ancient Rome and the gladiators who fought in the Colosseum, it's difficult not to picture huge, muscled men with bushy beard duking it out. Yeah, I mean, of course, the majority of gladiators were men, so this would be an appropriate, correct mental representation of gladiatorial combat. Now, I'm not sure about the beards, though. It depends where they're from. But apart from that, the muscles, yes. Do you remember that article that we read at one point that was trying to push the idea that all gladiators were fat? I don't know if you remember that, but there are historians that connected themselves with historians. This is often the depiction of the typical gladiator in pop culture and media. Yeah, that's probably the typical gladiator, at least when it comes to the muscular part. I'm going to be honest. As we know, gladiators were divided into gladiatorial classes. And gladiatorial classes not only determine the type of equipment that they would have used, whether it be a trident and a net, whether it be this guy's fully armored with this type of helmet and he's using a gladius, or he's using a sica, the bent one, or he's using a sort of a buckler type small shield with a spear, or like the sagittari, so archers. So yeah, all of that determines the type of equipment and training that you're going to go through as a gladiator, but it also determines your size, because you do have gladiator classes such as the murmillo and the secutor that tended to be bigger guys. So I imagine that if you were like one of those proprietors, owners of these ludus, schools of gladiatorial combat, and then you got a new batch of slaves, although I'd like to underline, not all gladiators were slaves, okay? There were gladiators that decided, you know what, I'm in debt, I don't know how to pay those freaking sharks coming after me, I want to join the school. That was a thing even for Roman citizen, for the possible prospect. I mean, if you're good at fighting and a good body, quick, dexterous, and you didn't have anything else, like your family was kind of low, you didn't have money, you didn't have land, some people did choose to do that. There were also slaves, a lot of slaves, in fact. So imagine you got a new batch of slaves. Sometimes you would decide, depending on where they're from, to represent their culture, because of course a Thracian is usually people from Thrace. But other times they'd be like, oh, look at this guy's good. You will be a good Murmillo training. Then you see another one, you're going to be Retiarius, because it's a smaller guy and you want him to be agile. So that's definitely a thing. So when you imagine muscular men, they're either Murmillo or Secutor, which is kind of the same as a Murmillo, but with a different helmet to make it harder for their usual opponent. And as a note, when it comes to the ancient sources, the Murmillo class usually fights against either the Thracian, the Oplomachus, occasionally the Samnite, but then, at least according to Valerius Maximus and Quintilian, they become regular opponents of Retiarius, so the class with the net and the trident, which fit perfectly in the minds of the ancient Romans, because now you've got a fisherman against a fish, since the Murmillo is the fish, because each class would fight specific opponents to make it fair. It basically was a game, so it was balanced, and the Secutor is a patch. If we want to look at it from a modern gaming perspective, the Secutor is a patch for the Murmillo, because the Murmillo had a helmet in the shape of the Murena, so the type of a sea eel. It's kind of a fish that they represent, but the problem is that it was pointy, so the net of the Retiarius would connect to it a bit too easily. Of course, if the Retiarius failed the throw, good luck having to deal with a big guy, but in general, the Romans considered that to be like, yeah, it always gets stuck, so how about we basically patch it, get the Secutor against the Retiarius, because now they invented this smooth surfaced helmet, which, by the way, to me is the best looking, because it looks scary, it looks like it's coming from Silent Hill or something, and then now it makes it a lot more interesting, because it's not as easy, so you gotta work for it, which is what they wanted to see. However, there is a type of gladiator that often goes unrecognized, the female gladiator, also known as the gladiatrix or gladiatrices, yes, singular plural. These women were fierce fighters, shrouded in mystery, with little documentation or references to them in history. All right, let's start dissecting this. Are they shrouded in mystery? Yes, but simply because they were a rarity. There are mentions of it, by the way, in the sources. There is less, though. So the mystery comes from the lack of period references. I mean, there are some, but not a lot. So yeah, true. Were they fierce fighters? It depends what you're trying to say. Because if you're trying to say, look, women are so empowered, no, because they didn't put them against men. Women fought women in the arena whenever that happened. Why? Because the Romans knew biology better, apparently. Because the reality is that they knew that if they put a gladiatrix against a murmillo, she's dead. Okay? So there is that. Now, weapons can be equalizers, but not to a point where it depends on the weapon. So, and in general, from a Roman perspective, pitching a woman against a man, it was weird. Like, why would you do that? The guy has too much of an advantage. So even if she's so technical and the guy is a clown and she wins, which could happen if you have a weapon, like if you give her, I don't know, a spear and she manages to thrust you through the throat, I mean, the difference in body mass at that point doesn't matter as much. But you have to look at it as averages, because this would be a sport, a bit like MMA. And so, on average, men would win. And besides, if you give them shield and short sword, now it makes it harder for the woman, because it's a lot more close combat than if you give a woman like a long sword. Sometimes I've seen some fights in HEMA where the girl won. But once again, men have the advantage and Romans wanted balanced fights. So fierce fighters, say it all you want, the Romans did not pitch them against men. Alright, if you like the information, I'm going to get into a lot of details when it comes to the Murmillo class, the trident, the representations from the perspective of the Romans. So make sure you keep watching. But before we do that, I have an announcement. Massive announcement. Check this out. You're gonna love it. As many of you know, or at least I think you know, I've been writing a book, my new journey into becoming an author. I've mentioned this on a few videos and on X, but this book was indeed crowdfunded. Now, any person who has donated or will donate to the crowdfunding will receive a full audiobook, and this is crowdfunding exclusive. So, as a way to say thank you to the people that have donated and supported my dream of becoming an author, if you have a minimum of $5 donation, you will receive the entirety of the audio file of the book, recorded by me with my voice, no AI involved, as a crowdfunding exclusive reward. This applies retroactively, so for all 262 donors that I've had so far, you'll get this, and anyone who decides to donate $5 or more, thank you very much, never expected, always appreciated, then you will be guaranteed a audio file of the book by the end of the crowdfunding campaign. Important, once the crowdfunding campaign is over, this audiobook version will not be made for sale. So this is, once again, crowdfunding exclusive. It's a perk. If you're interested in the audiobook, click the link in the description, and thank you so much. Alright, thank you very much for watching that. Here is the part that I promised with the extra details on the gladiatorial classes, and then we'll return back to the article. The Retiarius is the fancy one because we see this very improbable fighter. I mean, he's lightly armored, he's got the net, he's got the trident. In fact, let's have a look at the trident. Sorry to interrupt you, Metatron, but I would like to say, note that in iconography, the tridents appear to have the same length. I don't really see a longer spike in the middle, so that could be an interesting version to recreate. I mean, look at this. They look identical in iconography. Anyway, sorry, Metatron, to interrupt you. Let's go. The meta. This is meta. There is a reason why the trident was given together with the net to this specific fighter. And in fact, no, there are 3 reasons. So let's go. Gladiatorial combat is deep and multi-layered. The reality of fact is that as modern people, whenever we look at the Retiarius, for example, fighting the Murmillo, the muscular big gladiator that is also carrying the Roman scutum and the gladius, we might just focus on the way they fight and the weapons that they're using, but we might miss out on what an ancient Roman would have seen, the sort of analogies that were connected to this specific figure and weapon. First, there is the physical allegory. So, the Retiarius is clearly the fisherman. He's got the net, he's got the trident. This is rather obvious, but what might not be is that the Murmillo is the fish. I agree with myself. But yeah, no, I can actually go deeper into this. Hey, Dash Renda, so good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining this absolute insanity of a stream where I'm now reacting to myself. Yeah, thank you very much, Dash. Good to have you here. Thank you. So, yeah, no, as I was saying, it's true. So that we always think that Retiarius is the fighter with the trident and he's the fisherman. I think we all know that. But the Murmillo is the fish. So from the perspective of the Romans, this was an obvious thing. This is the fish. In a mythological sense. Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate that. The helmet that the Murmillo class is usually wearing is a representation of a specific type of fish that in Latin was called murena, which means moray, eel. These ones here. So the whole representation that we are seeing there is that the Murmillo is a beast of nature, a sea monster that is hiding behind the rocks, aka the scutum, that the fisherman needs to try and hit in order to get him out. In other words, in the eyes of an ancient Roman, this battle between the trident-wielding fisherman and this horrible sea creature was symbolic and entertaining in their way, as that they could apply their imagination to what they were seeing. After all, these are gladiatorial games. All of this I would like to underline again. I agree with myself. Excellent work, Metatron. But I wanted to say that all of this would be obvious to the ancient Romans. Obvious. They would be like, oh, the Murena has entered, the Murmillo is in, and then he comes in, and then he goes for the monstrous attack against the poor fisherman who is struggling to stay alive and fight the forces of nature. All of this was obvious to a Roman. And it's a bit like when we watch something, and because it's based on our own mythology and ideas and religions and cultures and philosophy and whatever you want to put in it, then it's obvious to us. Well, this was obvious to them. Yeah. But let's go deeper. In the eyes of, after all, these are gladiatorial games. But let's go deeper. In the eyes of an ancient Roman, the trident-wielding combatant is also a representation of the god Neptunus, Neptune, who, as we all know, is the Roman god of the ocean. Or is he? Oftentimes when we think of the Roman gods and the Greek gods, we imagine that they are basically the same gods, it's just different names, but the reality is that they don't always overlap perfectly, and even though sometimes when we look at this case by case, some differences may be marginal, other times they are quite substantial. Now, when it comes to specifically the Greek version, so Poseidon, or as they say in modern Greek, Poseidonas, yes, he's the Greek god of the sea. But when it comes to Neptunus, so Neptune, initially he wasn't. Oh, and he wasn't even Roman, because the Romans got it from the Etruscans. So the Etruscans create the deity, the Romans adapt it, but in its early form, he was the god of the spring waters, the rivers, and the lakes, and only... This is actually a misconception that people have, when it's very simplistic. When you hear people saying, oh yeah, the Roman gods are just the same as the Greek gods, with Roman names, they haven't really looked into it. And I'm not even saying they haven't looked deeply into it, they haven't looked at all. Because if you do, you'll notice that, yeah, as I say, there's connection to the Etruscans, there is syncretism, don't get me wrong, they do merge together at one point, but there will always be a difference, and the original versions are different too. So, yeah. The eels have two sets of jaws, if you didn't know. I did not know that, David, so thank you for the expansion. Appreciate that. Now it's really Metatron Gemini, I agree. There is two of us, guys. Later, as we have a little bit of a merging or a syncretism with the Greek Poseidonas, he also becomes the god of the sea. All of this according to George Dumzil, fantastic expert in comparative linguistics and mythology. Strongly suggest to read his work. But I digress. Initially we said that when the Romans, an ancient... What's new? Roman were to look at a gladiatorial combat, a fight between a Retiarius and a Murmillo, they would not just see two guys fighting each other, but they would see a fisherman fighting a massive fish. But when this gets deeper, and it also becomes its own symbolism of ancient Roman religion, what is the Murmillo then? What is Neptune doing with the trident? Trying to kill a fish? No. According to Markus Junkelmann, German historian and experimental archaeologist, in this specific scenario, the Retiarius is Neptune. When he strikes the shield of the Murmillo, he is causing seismic shakes, also known in this specific context as underwater earthquakes, because do remember, the god Poseidon is not just the god of the seas, he's also the god of the earthquakes. All of this is impressive, but what it really helps us to understand is that yes, the trident might not be the best weapon that you could give a fighter in a gladiatorial context, but That's why I was responding to you earlier on, and we were like, yeah, we don't know if it's a great weapon design, because it's not a weapon designed to be effective. It's a weapon designed, or it's an implement that the Romans chose to give to this specific gladiator because it was summoning all of this. So that's what it was doing. But it is the perfect weapon to give to a fighter to impress the ancient Romans and make this game 10 times more interesting because of the stimulus that it would provide to the ancients' imagination. And as a final fun fact, in its initial version, the god Neptune did not have a trident. He had a bident, the two-pronged implement that we know ancient Romans were using to fish large fishes in the Po River. This is an image of Pluto, because in Renaissance art, they actually give the bident to Pluto. I'm done. Thank you. What we do know is mostly determined via inscriptions in literary sources, yes, taken from the early Roman Empire and at the end of the Roman Republic. That is correct. Join us here at Sky History as we examine the gladiatrices and their role in ancient Rome. Let's go. When did female gladiators emerge in Rome? Difficult to say, in fact. Female gladiators did not appear until later in Roman history. Okay, so when you say it like this, it makes it sound it's a dominant thing. It's not. Dominant is, you have the Principate, which is the early empire, and the dominant, which is the late empire. No, there are mentions in the Republican period, but maybe that's what they mean, like late Republican. Historians speculate of the exact date, but most agree that they began to emerge in the 1st century AD, around 107 AD to be more precise. I think they did exist in late Republic, but then again, it's difficult to prove. So I guess what you can prove, 1st century, fine. Nero's reign, I think there were more before, but whatever. At this point in history, gladiators have become a significant part of entertainment in Rome. No, they were already in the Republican period. Gladiators and their origins. I'm actually going to make a video. It's going to be a members video for the main channel. So if you're not a member of the main channel, do consider it, because I have been posting videos. The last one was 11 days ago. So sometimes, ideally, I would like to post one members video a week, so we get 4 a month. But we'll have to see, maybe 3 for now. But I will soon post this one, because the history of the origins, which are most likely funerary in nature and strongly connected to non-Roman cultures such as the Etruscan, are actually very, very interesting. Bringing women to the fray was a great way to spice things up, offering something unique and different. Sure. Let's see. Many considered female gladiators to be an exotic rarity, so adding them to the roster heightened the spectacle of Colosseum fights. No, this shows this. You know what this is, guys? It's one, I'll tell you what the sources tell us, because I'm saying no, because I've read the sources on this. What is this? This is this person knowing the bare minimum on the topic, not opening the sources because it's boring, I need to find the sources, and then speculating. They're thinking, well, yeah, this makes sense in my head. Of female, it's gladiator, it must be exotic, so people loved it. It's a great way to... No, we're told the nobility hated it. Roman aristocrats complain about it all the time. They say, why? Because a lot of these gladiatrix were noble women. They were of aristocracy, not slaves, as far as we know. So what this means is that these women, I think they were bored, and they liked the idea of, I want to do this, it's fun, I want to do it. And also they knew they weren't going to be put against men. The low class, the people liked it. Also because they fought half naked with their breasts exposed. Men like what they like. Okay? So we can see why. The people were like, yeah, it's fun, cool. That's why. But the aristocracy complains about it all the time. They're like, that's no place for a woman. That's what they say. That's what the sources say. I don't know what to tell you. Rome was experiencing a shift in perspectives, both politically and socially, at the time when gladiatrices came to be. Including them reflected these changes. No, it doesn't. While also adding a bit of shock value to the games. No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. This just shows, in fact, a pattern. People with power can do whatever they want. And oftentimes they have no repercussion. That is the one consistent thing throughout human history. What did female gladiators do? Gladiatrices were similar to gladiators in that their role involved fighting for entertainment. Correct. They would fight wild animals. No. Such as lions and boars. Never read anything of it. Or one another, yes, to prove their courage and strength while entertaining the people of Rome. Yeah, exactly. So between women, yes. As well as fighting each other, gladiatrices would also fight those with disabilities. I'm sorry, what? I'm not sure what that means. Can you help me understand this? Because what are you talking about? Someone in a wheelchair? There was more to female gladiators than cheap entertainment. Their position challenged the constructs of society significantly. Oh, they're gonna go into the gender roles. Yeah, the typical Romans against gender roles. I just said that if you read the sources, the aristocrats are like, woman doesn't belong in the arena. Their mere existence suggested change and defiance, veering away from the traditional domestic roles that women were confined to. Why do they always have to have a modern feminist spin to everything? Audiences enjoyed their inclusion in their games as they were a fascinating novelty of sorts. They enjoyed it because they could see naked breasts. Like, I don't know how to tell you that. So they literally are objectifying women. That's why they liked it. Nothing wrong, by the way, because we are hardwired to like that. Female gladiators in Roman art and architecture. It is difficult to pin down the exact date that the female gladiators began to be documented in Rome. However, a jest from a scholar in the 4th-5th century is considered the first introduction to the term gladiatrix. The scholar speculated on whether women training to perform at a festival that involved racy, half-naked dancing wanted to be gladiatrix meretrix. Okay, this translates to gladiator prostitute. Right. So basically, the aristocrats complaining about the female gladiators is a bit like men that complain about, like me, by the way, they complain about OnlyFans a little bit. I can imagine it's basically the ancient Roman version of OnlyFans complaints, and I complain about it. I will always complain about it. Although this was the first documented use of the gladiatrix term, archaeological and artistic evidence exists before this. Yeah, that's what I was saying. One particularly prominent piece of evidence is a marble relief. You talked about it. Yes, there's a relief. Great. It's in Turkey. The relief shows two female gladiators fighting. Yes. The two figures don armor. Yeah, the helmets and whatnot. And the shield and weaponry are identical to that used by gladiators, though they don't wear helmets. Yeah, they don't wear the helmets, I apologize. Making it hard to decipher their gender. Yes. However, their names, it's the names, of course. And inscribed on them. Also because they freaking shield, am I right? Freaking shields. Give him the small one. Another piece of evidence is a bronze statue. Okay, we have it. So in Roman texts, there have been a few references to Gladiatorix in the Roman texts, though they are rare to find. Meaning you didn't find them and you didn't read them. One significant example comes from the Roman historian and administrator Cassius Dio. When attending a festival held to honor the mother of Emperor Nero, Dio wrote of how women of varying ranks participated. The text states that women drove horses, killed wild beasts, and fought as gladiators, some willingly, some sore against their will. So there's that as well. So I'm not sure about empowered women if they fought against their will. Senator and historian Tacitus, yes, he's the one that complains, also confirmed that women of all ranks were often involved, writing many ladies of distinction disgraced themselves by appearing in the amphitheater. So you do know the passage. You do know the passage. Disgraced. Does that sound like, man, Rome is really changing their position on society and gender roles norms? Look at that. The Romans were so inclusive and disgrace! You're a disgrace! Go back to the kitchen is what Tacitus is saying. Tacitus is saying, go make me a sandwich, woman, is what Tacitus is saying. And, but I guess, the story is fascinating, yeah. Okay. Their role as fighters was often treated as a novelty. You just proved yourself wrong. You just did. But hey, the message is the message, am I right? You can tell that this is a woman. You can, though. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much.